Going to each two sessions, and the first one is simply a kind of a word of encouragement for the process that you're in, and the other seven will have to deal with areas of structuralism in the Old Testament. The first one is entitled "The Future Role of the Bible in Seminary Education" by Walt Kaiser. This was in Concordia Theological Quarterly back in 1996. It's a good article to read in total. I just want to point out a few points here. He's dealing with seminary education in general, evangelical seminaries, what has transpired in the last 25 years in some aspects, and what has been pretty much a major issue in seminaries throughout history. On the first page, he talks about between 1968 and 85, a large growth in evangelical seminaries and also liberal seminaries across the United States. But then from 1985, it started to decline. With that decline, some schools, thankfully not all, but some schools started cranking in and tossing out some very important areas of study, such as Greek and Hebrew, and anything a little bit hard or difficult, and they went more for, so to speak, easier subject matter. And the problem is, of course, what is needed out in the ministry, and what is the pastor and the teacher called upon to understand. Bottom page 246, the value of the Old Testament. One of the oldest questions in the history of the church is this: what is the value or worth of studying or using that portion of the Bible to which referred to as the Old Testament? Perhaps Christianity would stand to gain more from jettisoning her lineages with the Old Testament than she would lose. Much time, after all, is consumed in most seminaries teaching Hebrew and Old Testament courses or corpus. If that same time could be spent on more practical subjects, the ministry of the church would be much further ahead, or at least such is the imagined result. The problem, however, the Old Testament is not just one of many. It is the master problem of theology, warned Kraling. And Kraling proceeds to show why such is the case. Once one is awakened to the commanding importance of this question, one will be able to see that it runs through the whole of Christian history like a scarlet thread. Yea, more, one can see that much of the difference in theology springs from the extent to which they build Old Testament ideas and impulses into primitive Christian patterns. The tragedy today is that more and more Christians are beginning to agree with the awful estimate which Adolf Harnack, not known for his conservative theology, gave of the use of the Old Testament in Christian thinking, living, and study. Harnack disturbingly concluded as follows: the early church was quite right to keep the Old Testament in the beginning, but she should have jettisoned it very soon. It was a disaster for the Lutheran Reform to keep it in the 16th century, but for Protestantism to cling to it as a canonical document in the 20th century is a sin of religious and ecclesiastical paralysis. And of course, we don't abide by his theology, but that is what his viewpoint was. Yet the fact remains true to the present day that almost every aberration in Christian theology can be traced back to some incorrect estimate of the use or abandonment of the Old Testament. And I actually heard a person with Harnack's view over when I was teaching in India back about 25 years ago at a seminary in southern India. This guy came to speak in chapel. And one of the points he made in chapel was, the church today is a New Testament church. So all we need is the New Testament. I'm kind of thinking I'm hearing things, because that is not the stance of the seminary. This guy kind of waxed eloquent for a couple of minutes of, there's no use in studying the Old Testament. You just have to preach and teach the New Testament. And I thought to myself, wow, what a warped view of biblical reality. And what is the Word of God and where it fits, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Bottom page 248. The great failure of the moment, as judged from the perspective of Scripture, is that there is an enormous famine in progress in many churches for the Word of God. Days are coming, declares the Sovereign Lord, when I will send a famine through the land, not a famine of food or a thirst for water, but a famine of hearing the words of the Lord. And for the flock of God who truly wants to study, interact, meditate upon God's Word, and to interact with it and study it firsthand. Page 251. It is also very clear by now that our generation has left an ethical and moral conundrum of enormous proportions that is due in part to a tendency to avoid instructing God's people in the law of God in the Old Testament. Little or no instruction was given about the value of preborn life prior to 1973, and now we find that we are reaping what we have sown, as we are now approaching 30 million babies lost to abortion since 73, a figure that represents the total population of Canada at present, and a figure that represents about 5 times the 6 million Jews of whom Hitler authorized extermination. At this very moment, another threat sits on our doorstep with little or no instruction from the biblical text: euthanasia, or assisted death by doctors. In a recent poll, over 66% of the American population saw nothing wrong with suicide assisted by doctors. The man with the office next to me in seminary heads up our counseling program. He works full-time for many years. First he was a police officer, then he went and got degrees in counseling psychology, and he's one of the head counselors at the Wayne County Jail, which is Detroit, city of Detroit. His comment is, if it's grisly and bloody and gory and it's on television at 11 o'clock at night, I have to interview the person. And he's been doing this for years, just a solid Christian, has good theology background by way of degrees also. But we were talking about something similar to this about a year ago, and his comment was that he says most of the hardened criminals that end up in the prison system and the people that end up being the murderers on television, he says it's as if they have no conscience. Not only that, there is in the whole prison system, as you interview and interact with the prisoners, there's a big percentage of them that has no value on human life. But then his comment was, where do you get a value on human life? It's biblically based, the image of God. And so you take generation after generation where young children have basically no biblical background. And you hate to say it, but at times what more can you expect? And so you scrape away the Old Testament, you scrape away many, many important foundational principles that are musts when it comes to a biblical foundation for life. He talks about wisdom literature with my students every year in hermeneutics. I ask a question when we get to the wisdom books. I say, how many can remember in your church experience of teaching, preaching, how many here have ever had a study, a solid study through the book of Job? I usually in beginning hermeneutics have about 30 students. 1 or 2 hands will go up. How many have ever studied through Psalms? Not just 1 or 2, but studied through Psalms. No hands will go up. How many have had a good solid study of Proverbs? 2 or 3 hands will go up. How many have studied Song of Solomon? No hands will go up. How many have studied Ecclesiastes? 3 or 4 hands will go up. I get done with that and I say, wow, aren't we speaking out of both sides of our mouths? On the one side of our mouth as believers, aren't we saying it's really important for a Christian to be wise, biblically? Our life should be based on wisdom. And we'll sing that to the tops of the mountains. The other side is, are we involved at all in the wisdom books? Where might you think you might learn about wisdom? Why are they there? Why are they canonical? Why are they inspired? And so my encouragement to my students is, if you are involved at all in teaching within your church fellowship or helping to guide what is being taught, make sure we're not bypassing the Old Testament wisdom books. He points out here, bottom of the page, some issues there. Bottom page 252, the biblical languages. It must be asked if it is necessary to continue to study the Bible in its original languages. Ever since the revival of the study of Hebrew among Christians in the 15th century, prior to the Protestant Reformation, the study of Hebrew was taken for granted as an essential basis for biblical exegesis. Since 1549, for example, Hebrew has been required to receive a M.A. from the University of Cambridge. Thus, the founders of Harvard, being graduates of Cambridge, followed in the steps of their alma mater in stressing the importance of Hebrew and the preparation of ministers for the Gospels. Middle of the next page, the reading of the Bible in the original tongues of Greek and Hebrew was seen as a prerequisite for ministry. Some good paragraphs there. Read through those. Bottom of the page, Greek and Hebrew study involves more than merely ability to parse verbs, to look up words in lexicon, or concordance, or one of the 7 analytical tools in ways that can be taught in a matter of 2 or 4 hours of instruction. It involves, instead, the patient tracing of the threads of meaning through the syntax of the original languages. Translations are enabled to expose the joints or seams of some of these units of thought to the degree that a working knowledge of the original languages is able to give them. It is the tracing of these connecting points in the syntax of a passage that is so vital in constructing sermons that reflect the original authority of the Word of God. You can read the rest, some great statements. Go over there to page 255, halfway down. Machen, one of the leading professors, New Testament of that day, steadfastly resisted the revision just talked about previously. In a letter to his parents in 1909, he wrote, "The students are exhibiting a spirit of dissatisfaction with the instruction that is offered them. They had particularly singled out the course by President, Old Testament, New Testament. Other seminaries have yielded to the incessant clamor for the practical, and we are being assailed both from within and without. I only hope the authorities will have the courage to keep our standards high, not bother about losses of students, and wait for better times. It is the only course of action that can be successful in the long run." Very good article, and of course his conclusion is original languages, biblical studies is the foundation, that everything else is to be built upon it. Person says, well, taking Greek and Hebrew, I'm not going to be an expert. How many people are experts in anything? Are you an expert in English? But you use English every day in and day out, and you do pretty good. So again, the goal each year, be a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. Keep pressing forward in this area. One other article coming around which has to do with the study at hand.
So how would you respond to someone who takes that stand that there are so many good computer programs and resources now that you don't need to know the language, you have the resources to look them up to see the words?
Well, again, what that sounds to me is kind of some fashion of a word study. Word studies are important, but it's part of a much bigger. So, is the program actually leading the person in a process to where they can deal with reading the text, but also understanding the structure of the text? If those two come together, it may be a very serious thing, but often it's a piece of the puzzle rather than the whole puzzle that they're talking about.
Similar to that, it seems like some people are emphasizing evangelism, which is kind of goes along with the idea of the New Covenant, New Testament emphasis, where they don't understand or have understood, maybe for ignorance or for whatever reason, the worldview of the tribal language or the political perspective as a whole. They're just evangelizing. They let you go out and say,
But again, the Great Commission, in the center of it is teaching. Make disciples, but then you teach them. And so if you leave off the teaching part, you have a incomplete Great Commission.
Would your stance be on the subject of disciple? In our culture, would your stance be the average believer should have some basis in the original languages, or should only the leaders in the church? Or
I would say there's no reason why there couldn't be a number within a congregation that I know some churches like S. Lewis Johnson down in Dallas and his church, in what we call Sunday school, those who wanted to study Greek, there was a Greek class going on where you would do translation, you study, you want to study Hebrew, you want to study theology, and so on. And so those things were made available. And a person may say, no, I want the study of this book in English. That's okay. But those opportunities were there. And so a person could, wherever, in the average congregation, you have people from all different backgrounds, all different years they've known the Lord, all different levels of biblical education and interests. And so it was some good options. And so I would say, it's not something you mandate that everybody is going to, that type of thing. But that somebody'd like to, hey, it's right here. And students encourage other students.
part of the discipling process,
Mm-hmm.
the teaching process.
Mm-hmm. A few comments. This is John Lawler. I had a class in doctoral work years ago. This is out of Grace Theological Journal. Grace Theological Journal back in the, right about 1980. Test of Abraham. His analysis of Genesis 22, 1 to 19. Just a few opening comments. The manner in which the narrative has been put together evidences great literary artistry. Two factors unite to make the case. First, the use of repetitious statements seem intentional. The use of one such repetitious statement, Abraham, and he said, "Here am I," in verse 1 and verse 11, Abraham, Abraham, and he said, "Here am I," naturally divides the story into two general movements. Dropping down, second, there is a certain symmetry to the story, which is in part achieved through the use of both triplets and tension resolution. You can read through the article itself. It even gets down to page 21, where in both sections you have the word nasa, to test, breaking out in both sections, and many other words and even phrases occurring in both sections, covered there on page 22. But just for quick reference, go back to his chart in the conclusion, and this is what you start to see. Page 34. A number of interesting comparisons and contrasts can be observed between these two events. The first event, the account in Genesis 21, Ishmael in danger. Alongside of it, Isaac in danger. First off, verses 10 of chapter 21, verse 2 of chapter 22. Concerning Ishmael, crisis created as a result of human directives. Sarah tells Abraham to cast out Hagar and Ishmael. How is crisis created in the account on Isaac? As a result of divine directive, God tells Abraham to offer Isaac as a burnt offering. Abraham shows reluctance, verse 11. for Ishmael, Abraham shows no real reluctance to follow through with Isaac. God refers to Ishmael as Abraham's seed, Zerah, in chapter 21. God refers to Isaac as Abraham's son, Ben, in chapter 22:2. Sarah, aware of the circumstances concerning Ishmael, she was the perpetrator, verses 9 and 10. Sarah not aware of all the circumstances in chapter 22 of what was going to take place. Chapter 21, Hagar, the mother of Ishmael, could not stand to watch her son die, verses 15 and 16. Concerning Isaac in chapter 22, Abraham, the father of Isaac, did not shrink from observing the death of his son. Ishmael, action takes place in the wilderness of Beersheba. Action takes place at Mount Moriah. Those are the contrasts, the comparisons between the two parallel accounts. Chapter 21, firstborn cast out becomes a nation. Chapter 22, firstborn cast out becomes a great nation. Chapter 21, God promised to make a nation of Ishmael because he was Abraham's seed, verse 13. Chapter 22, God promised to make a great nation of Isaac because Abraham had not withheld him, verses 16 to 18. Concerning Ishmael, chapter 21, Abram rose up early in the morning to follow through, verse 14. Concerning Isaac, same phraseology, Abraham rose up early in the morning to follow through. Divine intervention occurs. Angel of God calls out to Hagar. Reversal of danger, verse 17, chapter 21. Chapter 22, divine intervention occurs. Angel of Yahweh calls out to Abraham. Reversal of danger, verse 11 and following. Chapter 21, water, life-preserving, was providentially provided. Chapter 22, the ram, life-preserving, was providentially provided. Hagar saw before that, the heretofore unseen well, verse 19. Abraham saw the heretofore unseen ram. Hagar appropriates the water without a specific divine directive. Abraham appropriates the ram without a specific divine directive. Hagar, in Egyptian, Hagar in Egyptian. Why does he takes away from Egypt? Yeah, it should be Ishmael. Ishmael takes a wife. No, let's see. Abraham, Mesopotamian, takes a wife from Mesopotamia for Isaac.
Oh, Hagar takes just a wife for Ishmael.
Yeah. That's right. Hagar, an Egyptian, takes a wife from Egypt for Ishmael. I was thinking of Abraham, but for Ishmael. That parallels. Conclusion. It seems apparent that one of the themes that the story presents as it is read diachronically is the testing and obedience of Abraham. That concept keeps reappearing in several different ways. That is not meant to imply that this diachronic motif exhausts the contribution of this celebrated story. One is inclined to ask the question, is it really possible on the basis of the details of the story as they were given to know what was going on in the heart and mind of the patriarch? What do his unusual reactions mean? In the synchronic direction, the account contributes to the exploration of certain religious and sociological relationships, God and man, Father, Son. But is there more? After some very extensive study, looking at the passage many different ways and from several perspectives, it is obvious the passage warrants further attention. And so very simply, he's dealing with structure. Is there structure there? Yeah, there's a whole lot of it. Does it create parallel columns in the mind of the listener or the reader? Absolutely. And of course, you learn from the comparisons, you learn from the contrasts in both. We will have an article by another author, Barry Banstrat. We'll go over it tomorrow night, also on Genesis chapter 22, and get into a little bit more of what is going on beyond the larger structure in the text. Questions, comments on either?
At this point, I'm not sure what we gain by that study, really. I mean, theologically speaking, you could lose as much as you gain because you could read more into it than there's really there, as we've discussed. But you always look for hidden meanings, and I don't know.
Yeah, I think
I'm
it's
struggling with this whole structuring thing.
Well, I think the simple thing is we have structure in everything that we present today. And what we know from looking and analyzing their documents, they had structure. It was different in format, but they had structure. And so as you take a look at the structure, you say, okay, knowing the structure, what is being emphasized? And are there many points or a few points? What is being contrasted? And so what I do is I take that as my pattern and form and build my teaching or my sermon from that versus me going in and superimposing either a Western pattern or what I think up in my head onto the text. And I think a clear example of this is when you get into Psalms. It's very clear now that the Psalms, there were different patterns of Psalms. And when you know that, and you come to a imprecatory Psalm, where the writer is all worked up, but he doesn't want to sin and be angry and to sin. And so what does he do? He vents it to God, and he basically says, God, you do something. You know, you should do this and you should do that, but I'm going to leave it in your hands, but you do something. Well, imprecatory Psalms have certain forms. And so when I come to an imprecatory Psalm, I better think of the form. Is the form there? Very often, and all of a sudden I start to see how is it put together, rather than just doing any old thing I want with it. We know there's styles of writing letters, and some of those styles are very well represented in the New Testament, and they had different parts of a letter. But what was probably the most important part? The body of the letter. That usually contains why it was written and what is to come across. And so do I spend 3 sermons on the introductory phrase of a letter? You might not want to. You may want to spend the majority of your time on the body of the letter, because that's why it was written, and so on. Okay, we come to...
a quick question about form. At the beginning of most study Bibles today, they have an introductory section that introduces the book. And they'll often have an outline. Is that more of a Western outline? Or is that like if I went to the introduction to Malachi, is it going to be a Western thinking outline?
Yes.
Okay. So now you're not trying to get into the structure of the original.
Well, it depends on who's put it together. Now, he will spend, what's he going to do? Let's take a look at the book for a minute. He is going to spend up through page 44. Pretty well the items for analyzing and identifying structure, he will overview through page 44. From page 47 on, we are going to go all the way through the Old Testament, and he is going to show you book after book after book after book after book, the major Semitic structure. And that's what we'll be looking at. So all of that is example of what he is saying here is very much the case. But what I'm getting at is, I would say, as you look at the structures of the book here, if it's a symmetric style, that I make it linear, who's right or wrong? That's right. And so that's the problem. That's the problem. So...
It's not to disregard, though, in relation to what Jack was saying, that there is very possibly multiple structures within the text
well, we know there are.
where you have additional
Sure.
you still want the single, what is the single meaning of the text, or what is the author's intent, if there are structures within.
But if you think Western and you think it's going to be at the end and it's a symmetric study, you're going to be way off.
But if we understand it's symmetric, we can take that form and teach it in a linear fashion. We can take the main points that we recognize in symmetry out of the text and teach it to our audience in a linear fashion that they would best understand, showing them the symmetry of the text.
Yeah, you could attempt to do that, but I don't think our audiences are that dumb. I mean, if they can understand nursery rhymes that are in symmetric patterns, you simply say, this is what it's like, and this is how we'll study it. And they may say, I really enjoy that. That really makes sense. And so I think what we have to say is, these are our styles, that's their styles. And it's not, you don't clobber them with it, but you kind of show them here. Oh, that's interesting. Hey, by the way, later study, here it is over here. And so it just becomes another thing you understand and use. Okay, open, let's see here, in your Bibles, Hebrew Bibles, to the book of Joshua, chapter 12, verse 7. And you will find something that looks like this. In fact, it should look like this. This thing is having a hard time. Let's see here. Is your page like that?
12:7. Yeah.
Is it half and half? Starts on the bottom, goes to the next page. Let's see. And I would like you to translate that. Look at it. There's structure there. Structure is going to help you. Let's take about, let's see what you can do in 12 minutes.
Starting with where?
Verse 7 through verse 24. And I say 24 because this is all in a cadence, so to speak. And so once you get the first one, you'll get all the other ones. So you're really translating 7 and 8 and 9. Everything else will fall into pattern. Got about 12 minutes. Go through 7 quickly and get everything you do know, and then go back and start to work on a few things you don't. Most of the words there, you will know. Yeah, those on tape will come back in about Va'aleh, Melkai, Ha'eretz, Asher, Hikah, Yehoshua, Uvne, Israel, Ba, Ever, Ha, Yardin, Yama. Someone start us off with the first couple words. And these are the kings of the land which was anybody able to define that? Yeah, from Nakah, which means to smite, to beat, to conquer.
Which conquered or smote Joshua and the sons of Israel.
Wait, go over it one more time there. Think that through.
Yeah.
What is the subject to Hikah? Mm-hmm. Uvne?
the sons.
Yeah, good. So put it together again now. Read it again.
And these are the kings of the land which smote.
Verb goes, or subject goes with the verb after Asher.
Which
Yeah.
Joshua smote.
Good. Joshua
And the sons of Israel.
Good. Yeah, this has the idea of being across, being on the other side of. On the other side of the Jordan, Yama. You have a directive hey.
Oh, that's really wrong.
So remember our northeast southwest last night?
Okay.
What is to the west? Yam.
Yam.
So seaward.
Yam.
Yeah, seaward, westward, seaward. Okay? Put it together one more time.
Well, and these are the kings of the land which Joshua and the sons of Israel smote or killed or whatever they did to them.
On the other side.
On the other side of the Jordan towards the sea.
Good, towards the sea. Next one, anyone, sound it out. It's a name. Both words. From Baal God, G-A-D. That was a location, a place. From Baal God in the valley of, then sound out the next word. Yeah, in the valley of Lebanon, and up to, unto, until. Hahar, we had last night on our geography. Mountain. Yeah, this would be the actual mountain of Halak, which is up in the north. The one going up, and that's always a problem. Always a problem. You see this in some of the English translations. Is it a person's name, or is it? Yeah. The one going up, and you have another directive hey. The one going up, the idea towards seer, S-E-I-R in our English Bibles, but it's like seerward, that idea. And yeah, and Joshua gave it, who did he give it to? Yeah. Yep. To the
clans or tribes.
Gave to the tribes of Israel. Sheen, Vate, Tate means a division or a tribe. To the tribes of Israel, understood as Yerusha, means an inheritance or possession. So that land, briefly described, he ended up giving it as an inheritance, a division to the tribes of Israel. Then what do you do with the last word? We see a prefix and a suffix.
According to
their family.
Yeah, according to their... Yeah, it's the idea of tribal area or region. Verse 8.
In the mountain.
Yeah, in the mountain. And in the low rolling hills, Shephelah. And sound the next one out. In the Arabah, the dry lands. Yeah, this has the idea of being the hills of the west side.
Why is that? Did you know that? I'm not sure I'm the right one.
Should be with Aleph, Sheen, Dalet. And we had this last night, in the Midbar, the wilderness, and in the Negev. Then it breaks out into the people groups. The Hittite understood area, the Hittite area, Amorite area, Canaanite area, Canaanites, friends, Perizzite area, the Hivite area, and the Yebusi, Jebusite area. Now we get into our structure. Verse 9, Melech Jericho, Echad. King of Jericho, 1. Then what? Ai, King of Ai. What's it say about the King of Ai? We get a little comment. Probably who?
Who commanded? Mitzvah? Who, what? What, where? Now, some take that term as to be on the side of. On the side of Bethel. In other words, it was near the area of Bethel. 1. Verse 10. Melech. 1. Next. Sound it out. Hebron, 1. Next. Melech Yarmut. In our English Bibles, it is what? Jarmuth with a J. Melech Lachish, 1. Verse 12. We had this last night. King of Eglon, 1. King of Gezer, 1. King of, we had this last night. Devere, 1. King of Geter, Geder in English, 1. Verse 14. You're cruising. King of Hormah, 1. King of Arad, 1. King of Libnah, 1. King of, yeah, who do we think of that with that location? Adullam. Yeah. Cave of Adullam. Verse 16. Makedah, 1. King of Bethel, 1. Verse 17. King of Tapuach, 1. King of Pepper, 1. Verse 18. King of
Aphek, 1. King of Lasharon, 1. King of Maron, 1. King of Hatzor, and this is what in English? Hazor. We usually say Hazor, but it's a Hatzor.
First word, first name of 19.
First of 19, Maron, M-A-R-O-N.
Is that a Rish or that's a Gaelic?
Madon. Verse 20. Yeah. Shimron. 1. King of King of Ta'anak, 1. King of Megiddo, 1. Verse 22, King of Kedesh, 1. King of and it is where? You're given a little, Mount Carmel area, Carmel. Verse 23, you're on a roll. King of Dor. King of Goim. Nations. And it's located where? Belonging to Gilgal. Verse 24. King of Tirzah. 1. King of... How many kings in all? 31 kings in all. Good job. Open up to Judges chapter 1. Judges chapter 1. What's that?
Like an ancient spreadsheet.
It sure does. Yep. It's kind of interesting. You kind of expect along there it's going to say 2. It's like 1.
Is that just that there was one king?
It must have been, and it must have simply been, a simple accounting. Even though they're all ones, the one was given, and then a total was given. 31 kings in all. If you want to check it, you can check it. 31 kings in all.
The town would have had 2 kings, they would have said 2 there after it.
You would think, sure. Yeah, you would think. But keeping very good, solid records. Okay, how far did we get last night? Chapter 1, verse right around 19. I remember making a comment. Okay, let's start then. Chapter 1, and let's start with verse 21. 1:21. And who will help us with 1:21? Yeah, what's it start out with? Verse 21? F? F, you have a C? 21? What is that? Yeah, sign of a direct object. The direct object happens to be the, you have a C? The Jebusites.
How do you know that from you saying with preposition?
Well, with is a possibility, but here you have the Makef, and you need a direct object.
The Makef is an automatic giveaway?
Yeah, most times. Just about in all grammar, you can never say always, but okay. So we have our direct object. What do you do in the next term? Your shape? Yeah, the one's living. Understood? In Jerusalem, lo, did not. Harishu. To push out, drive out. Some say expel, but drive out.
Sons of.
So put it together. Who did what?
And the Jebusites living in Jerusalem did not drive out the sons of.
This is fronting. We talked a little bit about fronting last night. What's being emphasized?
The sons of Benjamin.
Sons of Benjamin is your subject. They're the ones that did not push out the Jebusites. Well, why would the Jebusites be put, a direct object be put first?
Oh, there's the receiving of the act.
Normal Hebrew sentence is what? Verb, subject, object. Here we have object first. So it's unusual, catches your eye. Grammars, at least their grammarians today, call it fronting, but it's kind of like now this comes in focus. Keep your eye on this. The Jebusites, the Benjamites could not expel. It's kind of that idea. Then what?
Is that show again?
Mm-hmm.
Show the,
Or wait, where are you? Let's see. With the sons of Benjamin in Jerusalem, until this day. So what do we know? What do we know? We know that the human author God has used, or authors, maybe prophets, that this was written, of course, after the close of the time of the judges, apparently. And some, whether it's centuries or whatever goes by, the Jebusites are still living there. Now, this would be a good point. How do we know then the latest time that this is authored, based on that fact? Based on that statement. Good. Why? David expels the Jebusites. So the book of Judges, this is section of the book of Judges appears to have been produced, Spirit of God, human author, before David comes to the point of pushing the Jebusites out. Internal evidence for some of the timing. Yep. Okay, until this day. Verse 22. Now things get interesting. Now you start to see a little bit of internal structure, something like we just looked at there with Joshua 12. Also Joseph went up. Yeah, what understood in the context against Bethel, and Yahweh was with them, and Root here is what?
House of Joseph. And
Tav, Vav, Resh means to spy or scout.
the house of Joseph scouted, spied out.
Mm-hmm. We had this last night. The name of the city before understood was Luz. Luz. Verse 24.
So what is Luz?
Name of the city. Luz. A loser from lose.
It means light in Spanish.
Light in Spanish, lose, light. And we just had this word earlier tonight with the young story from the synagogue. Yeah, the guards, the watchers. What'd they do? And the guards saw Ish, a man, Yotzei, from Yetzah. Yeah, coming out, going out from the city, and they said to him, it's not see, it's from Ra'ah, Resh, Aleph, Hey.
Many of them.
Normally it's S-E-E, but here it is the idea of to show us. And they said to him, please show us.
The way in.
Yeah, the entrance, the way in
To the city.
to the city. Now, hermeneutically, analyze that statement. Are they so ignorant that they can't find the gate of the main gate of the city?
They want a good one.
Yeah, and so is there, so to speak, the underlying idea, is there a back door, a hidden way into the city?
Pipeline up to Jerusalem, actually.
Good. In through the water system or something like that. Good. Because you read some commentaries, I mean, you kind of scratch your head like, they couldn't figure out where the main gate of the city was. It's usually where the road is, isn't it? It's like, why would you ask somebody that? It's like, it's a thing that goes like this, Oh, okay.
Well, the gate isn't necessarily a weak spot, though.
Right. Could be one of the strongest spots.
They showed us in our trip to Israel how which gate was it where they designed it so that on the approach you had to go.
They had to make a left or a right.
You couldn't get around.
Yeah, up at Megiddo. Yep. So they asked him, where is that way in to the city? Then what? End of 24. Yeah, from make or do.
They were devoted to.
We will do what? It's like we will do with you. Will, with Hesed. So we're going to show you mercy if you, we're not going to mistreat you if you show us this. That's all you got to do. So he shows them that. Chesed, yeah.
No, right before that.
Oh, before? With. With you. Verse 25. And take the mem off. It's like this, yeah. It's not what you normally think. You're right. The show, that's it. And he showed, what do you do with the mem? Them. And he showed them the entrance of the city. And here's the word we kept coming across last night that's missing. Yeah, the smite. And they struck them, they beat them, they smited the city. That idea. With what? We had this before. Yeah, the edge of the sword. And meanwhile, the man, spotlight now on the man. The man and yeah, good. The man and all of his family. Shalak normally means what? To send? Yeah, they sent away, that idea. And this is interesting. Now we get a little repetition. Is there anything going on here? We won't have time to stop right now and see, but you have some repetition. The man went, understood probably two, land of the Hittites and Beit Nun root, Banah, yeah. And he built a city and called the name of it Luz. Or we're back to Luz. Then a little comment, passing comment here. Shame. Female, yeah. Yep. So he built a new city. Remember the old one? Went away. Luz. He was from Luz. That's past history. He builds a new city and he gives it its name because the other one's out of existence. New Luz. Verse 27. Manasseh. But notice what is fronted again. Hareshim means inheritance or possession. Manasseh didn't take theirs as they should. That's the idea. They did not take what? Beit Shean? Beit Shan? And then an interesting phrase that will come up over and over and over again. And Ben Banay, Bat Banot. Yeah. So it's the idea of what do we call it? What sister churches? If one church starts another, that type of idea. Here it was like daughter villages. If it was the little villages, probably out around the main city. So they did not take Manasseh did not take Beit Shan and the villages around it. That's the idea. And this was just in that other list you just went through. Ta'anach and its daughters, and the ones living in Dor and its daughters, and the ones living in Yibleam and its daughters, and the ones living in Megiddo and its daughters. Then it changes here. It's not shame, but from Psalm. I think Mark had that earlier. He had it. Remember, we didn't say place, or we didn't say put, but place.
Is that the fourth word you're looking at?
Yeah, right after, well, I'm a little bit farther down, after Israel. What's the subject of the next clause? After the daughter villages of Megiddo. Vayole? Hakananani? The Canaanites, and the Canaanites Yod Aleph Lamed. To desire. So the Canaanites desired to do what?
I'm lost. I'm sorry. Where are you?
Right after the daughters of Megiddo.
They desired to live in the land
They desired to live in this land. Good.
I lost you that. I thought that. What do you have from?
Yeah, Yashav with the. What do you do with the final tav?
So that's guard.
Or to live, from live. The ones who live. In the land, that land. Okay, verse 28. That Chazak Israel. Israel did what? Became strong.
Now, do you understand became there?
Some would say had become. And who did what here? And
Israel named.
Not name. It's not a sheen, but a scene. Back over here. Put. Who did what there? Yeah, Israel. And they understood Israel, put the Canaanites. Mas is to pay tribute. pay tribute and many commentators believe what we have here, grammarians believe that we have an idiomatic expression because you have one word used twice, two forms of it, and it has the idea of what? What's the root mean? Yod, Resh, Shin. Possession, yes. So they didn't do what? They didn't possess the possession. That's kind of the idea. Didn't push them out. Okay, now it gets, the plot thickens. Verse 29. Ephraim and Ephraim did not possess the Canaanites, the ones living in Gezer, and the Canaanites, what they do? They lived Care of in the midst, Gezer, another tribe, and Zebulun did not possess the ones dwelling, understood in Kitron, and the ones dwelling in Nahalo, yeah, probably, but the Canaanites lived among them. And they became a what? Yeah, so they're ones paying tribute. We get a pattern. What's that? The Canaanites. Canaanites are paying it to the tribe of Zebulun. Next tribe. Asher did not possess. It can also mean expel, push out. Do not push out the ones living in Akko, still in existence today. Akko, and the ones living in Zidon, 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 and Aklav, and Akziv, and Helba, and Aphek, and Reho, and the Asherites lived. This is important. This is 32. This is important. You've heard a little cadence go on. This tribe didn't expel the Canaanites, but the Canaanites lived among them. This tribe didn't expel the Canaanites, but the Canaanites lived among them. 3 or 4 times, and all of a sudden now what? This tribe didn't expel the Canaanites, but they lived among the Canaanites. And so it's like, whoa. Yeah, and so in other words, were they so weak that they kind of fit in between the cracks, so to speak, and didn't have control of the situation, what it sounds like.
Well, didn't you just say it in verse 28 that Israel became strong?
Yeah.
But that's
Big contrast. Yeah, so, I mean, some are strong and some are extremely weak to the point where,
they were
assimilated in.
tolerated.
Goes back to your idea of strengthening regional.
Yeah, to where Ephraim, may have had no problem with somebody, but, Zebulun may have been on the ropes, up to where they lived. 33, we'll take a break in about 3 minutes. Here we go, 33. Naphtali did not push out the dwellers of Beit Shemesh and the dwellers of Beit Anath. And they lived among the Canaanites. Naphtali's not doing well either. The dwellers of the land. And so the next couple words kind of boasts up the Canaanites. Hey, they're the ones that are really dwelling on the land, that idea. And the dwellers in Beit Shemesh and Beit Anath, Ha'u, they were for them paying tributary, that idea. And Ha'amori, the Amorites, Vayel Kazi, Kazu, I should say. And they pushed, or they pressed, who? Sons of Dan. This gets bad here, guys and gals. And they pressed the sons of Dan into the mountain country. Yeah, because what is the Holem Vav on the end of Niftheno mean? Who does him refer to? Him refers to Dan. So the Canaanites are not allowing what? Or the Amorites, I should say, are not allowing what? They wouldn't let them come down. You got to stay up there. This gets, it's sad but humorous. It's like they didn't do what they're supposed to do, and now they're trapped up in the mountains looking down on the people that they were supposed to cast out. It's just unbelievable. Didn't let them come down into where? Amek. Into the valley. And Ha'amori, the Ammonites, what do we do with the verb? Yod Aleph Lamed. Means to will something. The Amorites willed or were determined to do what? To live in Mount Heres in Ayalon, which is a valley area, and in Ahavalim, and notice here the root is kavod. And what was kavod? Kavod can mean what? What is the bottom line? Weight. Yeah. The glory of God is what? God has weight. God has importance. That's the idea. From kavod we get what? When it comes to money. Yeah. And so the measuring out of things, I mean, and so on. But here, what was heavy? This is kind of the idea, but in the midst of, that's kind of the idea. The hand of who? The house of Joseph, sons of Joseph was heavy, and so it's almost the idea of yet. This is the mess, this is the situation, but yet the hand of the house of Joseph was heavy on who? Heavy, and what happened? Yeah, it came about they were tributaries. They were paying tribute. And, last verse, 36. Yeah, the territory of the Amorites, understood, was from which means to ascend something, ascent, from the way going up or ascent of Rabim, from the what? Selah, from the rock. There was some rock that everybody knew. And Allah with a mem, from the ascent. Good job. Let's take 10 minutes. We'll come back, get in chapter 2.